All right, guys, what's going on? We are going to talk today about the Montreal Canadiens' potential trade targets for them. And as they are sitting now into a playoff spot, we'll see who they're going to target from now into the trade deadline. I'm going to go over a few names. You guys can definitely debate with me on the names I bring up. In the comments, let me know. Let's talk about it. All right, so the Montreal Canadiens, for me, have had a really surprising offense this year. Defense has obviously been not too bad. Goaltending has been overall solid with Price and Niemi. But up front, you've obviously got a bounce back player in Duran. The acquisition of Max Domi has been huge, and the underrated addition of Tatar to the Pacioretty trade has been unbelievable for the Canadiens. And the Canadiens' weak and a little offensive depth has now become a really solid top nine. So we could talk about the one addition that they could use up the middle. Obviously, you got Deneau playing there, you got Domi, and then you got Konemi on the third line. So overall, it's not too bad. You obviously don't want to give up a big piece for a guy that might not fit in your long terms, especially with having a guy like Suzuki, who's looking really good, a guy like Ryan Poehling, who looked unbelievable in the World Juniors. But yeah, we can talk about that. But I think the bigger focus for the Canadiens should be on the back end, specifically on the left side. So you've got Victor Mete, who's played a lot of minutes with Shea Weber. You got Mike Riley, who's played honestly pretty well with the Montreal Canadiens. He's been playing with Jeff Petrie for the most part. And then your bottom pair, who's was kind of up in the air for a while, but the addition of Brett Kulak has been pretty underrated. He's been playing decently well, and mostly with Jordy Ben on that last pair. So a guy like David Schlemko, $2.1 million contract per year. He's got an extra year next year. I'm going to talk a little bit about that situation. But their left side is obviously weaker. That's no question. Mete has potential, and we know that, and him playing with Shea Weber can obviously help that. So let's talk about the defense that they could add. Marc Bergevin was in attendance himself in person at the Winnipeg Jets versus Anaheim Ducks. Obviously, the Jets blew out the Ducks in that game. But in my opinion, I mean, you could be looking at a Nick Ritchie, you could be looking at a Jakob Silfverberg. There's a few names up front, but I think he was focusing on the defensemen. I really think Hampus Lindholm might be more untouchable for Anaheim, but a Cam Fowler was on a $6 million AAV per year contract. That could be a really intriguing asset for the Montreal Canadiens. You could have a Fowler-Petrie pairing and keep Mete and Weber together, drop Mike Riley down to the bottom pair, have him with Jordy Ben. That could be a perfect fit for the Montreal Canadiens. Cam Fowler, who's a really good two-way defenseman, he's great on the breakout, can play in offensive minutes, but pretty responsible in his back end. Obviously, the Ducks have been struggling all over the place, especially the back end, for a defense that looked really solid for the last few years. Maybe him playing with the Jeff Petrie, who's had an unreal year this year with the Canadiens, breaking out on offense, and on the power play, he's looked unbelievable, especially now with Weber back. That's one name we can talk about, especially the Ducks. I think there's obviously some options there. A few other names, I think Fowler's actually a really good fit, but there's a few other names I could talk about. Edler, who actually just kind of got injured on a stretcher, he could be an option if the Canucks don't re-sign him and fall out. Jay Bouwmeester with the Blues. Bouwmeester, I think there's been some rumors, maybe a possible return to Calgary, but he's an option. Nick Kronwall, if he kind of falls out of favor, and the option of retiring with the Red Wing, I mean, doesn't become an option anymore. But even with Duncan Keith, I feel like Keith and Kronwall, they both kind of want to retire with their respective teams, the teams they played their whole career with. But if they want to compete for a cup, I'm not sure that's with Montreal. So that's the only thing I would add to that. We talked about Kronwall and Edler already, two Swedes. Nick Jarmelson is another one with Arizona. Arizona, again, kind of a fringe team this year. They've been better, but Nick Jarmelson's definitely a good option. Again, could play really good minutes with Jeff Petrie, who's got more offense than defense. Jarmelson can kind of balance out that pairing. So that's where I could see them adding on defense. Now let's look at some forward options. They could add some depth. Maybe a guy that can play center and wing. Obviously, Domi, who's played pretty decent at center. You could obviously relieve him sometimes in the wing. Same thing I mean, there wouldn't be anything against dropping Deneau and Kotkaniemi down the lineup, but they've played pretty decent with the minutes they've been getting. One name I could see if Edmonton falls out is a Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who's under a $6 million cap hit. Andrew Shaw, who's kind of been hurt, hasn't been really consistent under his $4 million. He's played pretty okay. So if you had to drop like a Shaw or a Lehkonen down to your fourth line, I don't think that's the worst thing. I think right now they have like Charles Hudon on their last line and guys like that. So it really is interesting. I don't think their fourth line's too solid. So I mean, if you had to drop a guy or two down, create even more depth, not the worst thing again. I think they could look at big centers like a Kevin Hayes or a Brian Boyle. I think those are definite options and guys that could, for Marc Bergevin, be really intriguing. And this one's really interesting. I want to hear what you guys have to think about this because Schlemko, who I said I would talk about, $2.1 million. He has another year on his contract, so it'll expire after the 2019-2020 season. He got sent down to Laval. You look at the Philadelphia Flyers, who just sent down Dale Weiss, who's I think on a 2.3, 2.5 around there, AAV. What about a Dale Weiss and David Schlemko switch? This kind of just came to me as a really good idea. Dale Weiss, who played 2 and a bit years with Montreal, he had 2 really good seasons. Maybe he comes back to Montreal, plays a third, fourth line role. It's better to have a guy that would be contributing in your bottom 6 in your forward group than a guy in David Schlemko who's just taking up cap and not playing for your team. And the Flyers, who struggle on defense sometimes and are kind of weaker on the back end versus up front, maybe they could use a David Schlemko on their bottom pair. So that's just a thought for you guys, just to throw at one trade scenario there. I don't think it would be a bad trade for either team. So please subscribe to the channel, guys. Drop a like. Hopefully you support the channel here. Lots more content, lots more trade target videos to come. Montreal, this is the video for the Canadiens, but we got a lot more coming. So again, Hot Take Hockey, this is John. Have a good one. Peace out.